Hello and welcome to Talk the Walk. I'm Raymond Yang. Following sweeping electoral reforms, Hong Kong's Legislative Council was expanded by 20 seats as the seventh term began this year. The pro-democracy camp has all but vanished from the chamber, and some have accused the legislature of becoming a rubber stamp. But one lawmaker has stood out recently for her sharp criticism of the government. Joining us tonight is Doreen Kong, who is one of many new faces in LegCo. Ms. Kong, thank you for coming onto the show.
Hello,
first of all, let me ask you if you think it's fair to describe the current legislature as a rubber stamp.
I don't think it is a fair comment. At least I think for me, I think, of course, from the present incident, I think from the latest incident, I don't think, the citizens, in Hong Kong will see me as a rubber stamp.
The latest incident that you've just referred to, I believe, it all started with a Facebook post that you made on Tuesday. You actually targeted the health officials in saying that it was actually rather arrogant and overbearing for them to invalidate more than 20,000 problematic vaccine exemption certificates. And you said there shouldn't be this all or nothing approach. So can you tell me why you used such sharp words in accusing the health officials in not listening to the public?
First of all, I think that the words that I use are not sharp or rude. I think why I will pose that questions. I think all of us, will share is that one of the important foundations of Hong Kong, of course, is rule of law. We live in a city, I think, where we require our citizens and also our government to actually follow, the law made by the legislature. And therefore, when I comment on the cancellation of all these exemption certificates, I think my focus is whether the action of the government follow the law, made by the LegCo, and in particular is the Cap 599L. And because I think, as you may remember, I am one of the members in the committees actually that that is responsible to review to pass the law. Therefore, I am very concerned whether the action, what I think the government now is saying is the administrative action is actually conform with the law. And regarding the use of word, actually, I did not use the word arrogant. What actually I use is arbitrary. Arbitrary, actually, I think is just meant that maybe, it's very, by the personal views, maybe not following, the rule. I think, these words, are not harsh words. I simply pointed out, which hopefully are just straightforward. Yeah.
Do you think the government should have consulted the health experts or the committee members that you've just said before making this decision? Or is there a better way out, such as going through the Legislative Council in maybe asking for adjustments or a review of the current procedure, and so that there could be discussions in LegCo?
I think, for the government, it is difficult for the government to go back to LegCo for any, before they take any actions. Otherwise, it will be very, inefficient. So, of course, the government will have, their power to make decisions based on the law. But, whenever, if there is, if it is not very straightforward, say, I think, for this case, I hope that, the Secretary of Health, before he made such a drastic decision, maybe, should have sought advice from, for example, from the DOJ.
Okay, so let's talk about what happens after you've published the Facebook post. You said you've received a lot of negative or even vile comments accusing you of not even siding with the government or even actually being on the other side, as in you should have sided with the government and supported the government with the policies. But now there are people accusing you of being a traitor and something like that. What do you feel about all these comments?
I don't think, those comments are fair. First of all, as a lawyer and as electoral members, especially for me, over the past actually few months, I received a lot of actually messages, from the general public, from citizens. Since the hotel, for them, they are very difficult. They have difficulty in booking hotels, or even for the unvaccinated Hong Kong people coming home. So since that time, I received a lot of messages. Maybe some letters from citizens every day. And for the exemption certificates, of course, I also receive a lot of comments from citizens saying that they really have difficulty. For example, by their health conditions, they really do not want to take the jabs, and they think they should have the choice. Therefore, based on a lot of the comments from the citizens I receive, every day. Therefore, I raised the question. Actually, when I first raised the questions about, 7 days ago, I actually, I'm also, I have a lot of patience. I raised the question, but however, I did not receive any response from the government. And I also, did not notice that, the government had made any move, that actually respond to the citizens' demands or requests. So therefore, I wrote a post, actually, quite desperately. And as a electoral member, I think I have to respond to citizens. And I need to, actually help the citizens to voice out their requests. And also, I think I just approached the question from a very rational manner around the rule of law. And as a lawyer, I think I have the duty to uphold the rule of law, and also as an electoral member as well.
So the government actually announced that people affected by this administrative measure, that their vaccine exemption certificates will be invalidated very soon. They are advising them to actually go to a public clinic for a consultation. Do you think this is one of your achievements?
No. That obviously is not my achievement, because I think my question, around this topic is, about why the Secretary of Health has such, an authority to cancel or not admit the 20,000 something, the exemption certificates. I'm not asking, the aftermaths, what to do next. I'm asking, about the procedure. But it seems that right now, I haven't, received any positive response from the government yet on this question.
And may I ask you, you feel especially strongly towards the vaccination of the elderly and young children, and you think that they should have a choice, especially because they're the vulnerable groups, or on what grounds are you making this argument that they should not be included in the current government's vaccination drive?
Okay. First of all, I think we need to look at our present circumstances. First, I think the vaccination rates of the general public actually in Hong Kong now is not very low. When we, for example, those citizens having, 2 jabs already, I think, passed 94%. And the number of cases right now in Hong Kong, I think, is quite stable. And we do not have a lot of death cases or very serious critical cases. So I think, if you ask me, given these circumstances, whether, we should, use this kind of actually quite stringent method, to ask, to try to what we call to convince, the citizens to take jabs, actually quite mandatory. And also, to extend the vaccine pass to, 5 to 11 years old kids. I think if you ask me, it is actually, quite too much. Therefore, actually, you can feel the citizens actually, they reacted quite strongly.
Okay, and I know you're not a health expert, but judging from your conversations with the public and the trades, do you see any room that the government can relax their anti-epidemic measures in the near future, and what are they?
I hope that, for Hong Kong, as we can see, apart from, the kind of personal freedoms, right? For example, the whether we can, we can eat, how many, how many can, eat together, or even, entering into certain specified premises. And I think a lot of, these restrictions, if you ask me right now whether we should keep it or not, I think, right now, if you ask me, given the number of cases and the vaccination rates, I think, a lot of these restrictions have to be uplifted. And I think, for example, if you ask me, should we, uplift all restrictions? I think, for some restrictions, for example, wearing masks indoor, I think, of course, we can keep it, for a certain time and see whether whether it's still effective. But, for other restrictions, for example, the vaccine pass, and also for a lot of the, other, restrictions, I think it's time for Hong Kong to move forward. Because I think the opportunity cost that we are paying, especially for businesses and for, the underprivileged, the grassroots, I think for them, they are hit hardest in, the 3 years COVID period.
Okay, I have just one last question for you before we go to our break. Many people have painted this picture that the more restrictions or the more relaxations the government actually achieves, the harder or the further away that Hong Kong is reopening the border with the mainland, because, as we all know, the mainland has one of the toughest COVID restrictions in the world. Do you agree with this situation or this analogy that the more we relax, the further away we are from reconnecting with the mainland?
I think Hong Kong has a specific position in this. We have one country, two systems. And I personally, I respect, the measures taken by our central government in respect of China, because I think China has its specific circumstances. But I think for Hong Kong, what I think we should do is we should, demonstrate to the central government that for Hong Kong, because of our, our special connection, because of our need as an international city, we should open up, and we can, open up, and we will protect our citizens, trying, the best.
Okay, Ms. Kong, let me stop you right there as we go on our break. Stay with us.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Talk the Walk. With me, I'm Raymond Yang. For those of you who've just tuned in, with us tonight is Legislative Councillor Doreen Kong. Ms. Kong, before the break, we were talking about the vaccine pass and COVID arrangements, but I'd like to switch the focus a bit to the upcoming policy address, which will be the first by our new Chief Executive, John Lee. Have you been in touch with government officials on your proposals, and what do you wish to see in his first policy address?
I have written to the CE on, my views and my hopes, regarding the upcoming policy address. And for the policy address, what I want to see, is a very concrete plan to provide affordable public housing for the 250,000 families who lived in a very bad circumstances in Hong Kong right now. And for the waiting line of the public, right now for the PRH, is actually not 6 years. 6 years is only, the most recent lucky ones who get it, had to wait. But, usually people, from as far as we know, usually people has to wait for about 10 years or even more for the PRH. So I think, if you ask me, that is the most pressing problem for Hong Kong. I think, a lot of my colleagues may share, my view. And apart from the time, I do find that, we don't have any concrete pipeline of all our PRH projects, which would fulfill this demand. So when I look at, the past policy address, they only contained very isolated, large projects with unsubstantiated promises of many housing units to be provided. But, these, will never, we know that, they never met, the promises. I hope this new government can take a more consistent transparent, and measurable approach to solve Hong Kong public housing problem.
Ms. Kong, by the previous policy addresses and the unsubstantiable targets, are you referring to this giant land reclamation plan of Lantau Island or the Northern Metropolis? So are you saying the government shouldn't continue with these blueprints?
Of course, I think for the Northern Metropolis, I support, the government, their plan on this. But apart from, developing in the new territories, I also think that, for the urban renewal is very important as well. We see a lot of old public housing estates in the urban areas. So I hope that the policy address would also address, the urban renewal problem. We can see that actually in Hong Kong, we have a lot of urban areas that actually have a lot of dilapidated buildings. And the citizens actually living in these old buildings, they actually have no ability to, renovate it from time to time. And I think that the government must take the lead to, for this urban renewal project.
So apart from housing, because you've seemed to link housing to the grassroots issues of like poor living standards, and also I know you've been touching a lot about the elderly issues and the poverty issues. So as a lawyer by practice, why do you feel so strongly about these issues? Has it got something to do with your personal experiences growing up, or is there any other reason?
Yes, I was from grassroots. And when I was a little kid, I also lived in, similar subdivided flats, right? So for me, the underprivileged and also the grassroots, of course, is my main concern. I have some kind of special connection in my heart with this group of people. Therefore, whenever, I go to, all these districts, especially, the lower income districts, for example, Sham Shui Po, Shek Kip Mei, actually, I feel very sad. And that's why, I did actually a lot of district work for all these citizens. And I do hope that in the policy address, the government would put more resources. And also, we need to have more systematic way to help them. I think we cannot, as a government, we cannot just delegate all this responsibility to NGOs. We need to actually, for the government, we need to know who we are helping and actually what they get. Right now, we give a lot of resources to the NGOs, but we don't have a very concrete plan, not systematic, to manage the whole thing.
But Ms. Kong, we all know that Hong Kong's position as the world's most unaffordable housing market is no secret. And then the previous governments led by Carrie Lam and also even Leung Chun-ying have both put the housing issues on top of their priorities. But it seems nothing has really changed over the past decade. So what do you see in John Lee that he's able to tackle this very long-standing issue?
Of course, I think one of the most important things is about the funding. Right now, as we all know, to solve the housing problem, one of the most important things is sufficient funding. If we look closely at for example, the Housing Authority and also the Urban Renewal Authority, I don't think they have enough bullets to resolve the housing problem, especially to build, enough for the 250,000, families regarding the PRH. So I do hope that, apart from having all this slogan or having this, big plan, first and foremost is to see whether we have sufficient funding. If we don't have sufficient funding, for example, in HA or in URA or in Housing Society, of course, we have to make, for example, 5-year plan. Maybe each year we have to provide, some fundings to them, extra fundings, so that they can fulfill this extra goal.
Oh, okay. The other issue, though, is about finding the sufficient land to build public rental housing and one of the ways the government is doing this is by building transitional housing. they are finding these small plots of land in urban areas or in the new territories, and so they can put people in who've been waiting in the public housing queue for many years into these like better living standard transitional housings, so they can continue waiting. Hopefully, in a few years' time, they'll be able to get on a public housing flat. Do you think this is a good plan, or it's not really solving the issue?
Transitional housing, by its name, is transitional, is temporary measures. For home, we all like to stay in our home for long term. So if you ask me, transitional housing is only a short-term measures. In the long run, we have to provide actually long-term measures to ease the problem. And also one thing I think some citizens, they also point out, to build transitional housings actually is very expensive. It costs about 800,000 per unit. And it can only serve, for example, for 6 to 8 years or even for 10 years only. If you ask me whether it is cost effective, I have doubt on that. And also, for building this transitional housing, we need to find land. And some of the land, actually, they have their specific purpose. For example, for school for the handicapped, school for the special care, kids. So if we take the land to build transitional housing, how can we build for the original purposes? Whether other peoples will get affected, I think the governments have to consider.
Okay, before we go, I'd like to ask you about your personal experience as a new lawmaker. I know it's around like 10 months since you assumed this job, but you seem to have a lot of media exposure, and you sound like a seasoned veteran. So are you getting help from any people in the legislature? So like your superiors, or you seem to have quite a bit of connection with the Federation of Trade Unions. So is there any chance that you will convert from an independent lawmaker and join allegiance with like bigger trade groups?
I also hope that I have help, from seasoned politicians. But in fact, I don't have any help. And why I have this kind of, new techniques, for example, using social media, I think, first of all, is my team. I'm very lucky. When I formed my team at electoral in January, I picked a lot of young people who shared my passion to serve Hong Kong people. And these young people, my team members, they all have, a lot of energy and also passion to serve Hong Kong people. And they work day and night, and they use actually new technologies. And they help me to use the technology to handle social, media, and also to connect with the public at large. So I'm very, I'm grateful, for my team members. And I think, I just have, my true intention is to help people, connect with them, listen to them, and then take action for them. And I do hope that, I have contributed, at least, for the last 9 months, and I will continue to do my best. And some people ask me whether, about your post in your social media, whether you just want to, get media exposure. Of course, the answer is not. Any media exposure that comes with it actually is a byproduct, but not the objective. My objective is to help the people. That's it.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for talking to us, Ms. Kong. So for those who have tuned in, we'll see you at the same time next week.